Thank you everybody so much for joining me for this very important conversation. I do appreciate it. And thank you. So before we get into our questions, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Maria Penga-Wallace. I lead on the advanced program for Colour and Tech, and that is for mid to senior tech folks. So all of you, so please do sign up at our booth to find out more about all of our different activations that are coming up. So we are going to have a conversation for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to ask them in the time that we have remaining, which should be for about 5 minutes. Okay, right, let's get into it. Fatai, would you please could you all give the name of your role and a little bit about what it involves? Fatai, over to you.
Sure, and it's great to be here. My name is Fadzai Madzingira. I am a director in the Office of Ethical and Humane Use of Technology at Salesforce. And so what that means is I work on writing policies to make sure Salesforce technology isn't being used to facilitate harm.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Muna Abongalami, and I'm a Vice President for Customer Success at Salesforce. I focus specifically on not-for-profits and higher education organizations, and just to ensure that they are using our technology in the best possible way for their mission impact.
I can't hear you.
I'm Deborah Harper.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I'm a partner at a company called Mindshare, who are a media agency. And among many things, I focus on how to provide more inclusive planning and targeting to underrepresented audiences using digital media and all forms of media channels. So that's me.
Thank you very much. Now, a question to you all. Who here knows exactly what blackwashing is? Do you all have an understanding of what that is? Okay, we're getting some shakes, which is why you're here, yeah? Okay, good.
Hello.
I've done a little bit of research. So someone called Dr. Tiffany Janner, this is her description of blackwashing. Worse than tokenism, corporate strategy to paint a veneer of wokeness, ill-advised approach that countless organizations have put in place as a knee-jerk response to the racial uprisings that followed George Floyd's murder. Okay, so if that's a definition of blackwashing, can I ask you all, have you seen this in your day-to-day? Have you seen this within organizations? Would someone like to?
Does anyone want to jump in? Oh, I suppose in day-to-day, I think there was a big conversation about the black squares back in 2020 when everyone was like, I'm just going to post a black square, and that was the end of their activism. The beginning and the end of the activism was the black square.
Did anyone else see that? Yeah, lots of nods.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have any other examples.
I mean, from my perspective, it's in a number of different industries. So not only the world of business, but if we think about the world of media, film, TV, then there is a significant amount of it in our current medium. So I personally think it happens, it exists, but at the same time, there are so many other things that we probably need to also be thinking about in terms of what I would describe as inequalities around the world. So for me, blackwashing is a thing. It's not wokeism.
Yeah, I think ironically, I would like to say I wish there was more blackwashing in my industry, because there's even tokenism is not that rife. You know what I mean? And I don't believe in tokenism because I don't think that, particularly as black people, we get given anything just because of the color of our skin. We get given things because we are the best at what we do. And oh, hey, also you're black, brilliant, that helps me tick another box. But not because it's not just a color thing, it's also you're the absolute best. So I don't really believe in tokenism. I think someone has to be first and someone has to open the door and let us through. I think that the problem is when you do it without any support. system in place. So brilliant, I've managed to get the best black person that I can possibly find in media to come join my team, and there's no mentorship, there's no sponsorship, there's no pay rise, there's no one to speak up for you, like there's no community, so you're forging the whole thing on your own. And so companies who are just employing you because it helps them to hit a quota and then overworking you and not finding a way to support you, then for me that is what blackwashing looks like. It's like you've literally just done this so you can tick a box, and but in media I would say that we're still really, really low in numbers in terms of black people, so it probably could do with a bit more door opening, and we'll figure out how we stay put.
I think that's a really good point in terms of let's have a little bit more. And I suppose the point about the blackwashing is we will look like we have a number of diverse folk within our organisation in terms of how it's presented, in the products that we communicate to our customers, our consumers. And then, you go to that organisation and you're like, oh, okay, this wasn't what I was expecting. And I suppose that's what this, Dr. Jana is talking about, the veneer of wokeism there. To that point, though, and Deborah, this is a question to you. So we've seen a significant rise in representation in advertising, media. So, and I suppose, lending into what you just shared, is that a good thing? That it's particularly that increase in representation in advertising.
Yeah, I think it's the double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like there's not enough representation, and then all of a sudden we have over-representation, and then we start to feel like you're just throwing black people on the TV now to, again, tick a quota. But then as black people, are we saying that we don't want to see ourselves on TV? Because wasn't that what the whole point was that we had more representation? So I think it has to over-index before it then plateaus and levels off. And so it's because we've never really had that kind of representation before. Now it feels like huge saturation. And eventually it will level off, and we will find our true kind of integrated place in the scheme of advertising. So I didn't really answer your question whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I think you can't make an omelette without breaking an egg. So
I suppose it also depends on what we decide the goal is, and I think that's part of the problem. If I think the goal cannot just be representation, right? Because I'm like, and I think that's where the veneer part comes in, is if you are creating a company that doesn't care about sustainability, isn't thinking about poverty, isn't thinking about fixing the world, but you fill it with black people, so you've done your job. I'm like, wait a minute. That can't be the goal. Like, it can't just be the goal of putting black, what is it Foucault says? Like black faces, like black masks, white faces. Like there has to be a point where we agree, like actually beyond representation, there is a goal that we're trying to achieve. And I think what's happened, and part of this blackwashing, is a lot of corporates have decided that the goal is representation. So as long as we can just fill the seats, we don't need to give these people any power, we don't need to give them any ability to make decisions, we don't let them build teams, we don't let them create their own organizations, we don't give them any support, but we just need to get them in the seats. We've done our job. And what perhaps we should be pushing back is like, actually we need to agree on what the goal of what you're doing is. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I also think we need to, well, the thing right now, we talk about representation, and that's the current theme. It's likely to change in a number of years to a different theme. However, I think the most important thing, I always talk to my organization and people that I meet is about, relationships and actually our customers. What do our customers look like? What are the people that we interact with look like? So for me, representation needs to be about ensuring that we have that commonality with the other person on the other side of the table or the desk, whether it's gender or race, that's where the representation needs to be for me. And I think it's important that, as we think about representation, it's everybody is represented.
Well, thank you so much. So I'm thinking as you're talking, and I'm also thinking about, the other 2 days of the festival, we've been speaking a lot about virtual reality, AI. And if we're talking about representation, is there potential for blackwashing to become more rife when you can literally create folk on your computer screen? Who would like to take that? Muna, you're smiling. There's nods. So what are we thinking?
Me? 100% yes, because at the end of the day, and this is something I find quite interesting about AI, because at the end of the day, somebody was at the foundation and the genesis of the code that created the AI. And therefore, whoever writes that program or creates that learning machine, as long as that person is thinking, and more importantly, that group or team are representative of society, then the ultimate output for that learning machine will do the thing that it's been derived and born to do. Now, if you don't have that representation in the creation of that particular element, then I think you will get a huge amount of bias. AI is just there's a realm of possibility with AI, but I think we have to be so careful in how it's created, and that creation is the most important part of it.
Absolutely. So I'm thinking, as customers, as consumers, as members of the organization, how do we now spot this? Because sometimes, particularly if we're talking about how there is a misrepresentation, if it is merging with, the scope of AI and all of the things that a lot of our tech organizations are talking about, they want to be in, the metaverse and in the future. How can we spot it?
So I think there's 2 things there. To Muna's point, if we're thinking about the use of algorithms in AI, it really has to be like design stage. And I know that that's something my office thinks about a lot, is like, how do we make sure that we're empowering our customers to ask the right questions at the beginning? Like, before you do anything, it's not just, how do we do this? It's, should we do this? And I don't know if enough people think about that when they're starting off. And I think that's part of that representation point, where the more diverse perspectives you have in the room, the more people you have who are actually going to question, is this the right thing to do? And so that's the first part. I think when we think about organizations, I think it takes me back to the point, and I know this sounds super corporate, but it's like, what is the key goal here? Like, when we say we're about to do or run a diversity initiative, what are you trying to do? And if it's like, okay, we want to make sure we have a diverse group of people who are the best at their job, and like Deborah said, more often than not, when we get in the room, we are the best at what we do. And it's like, okay, great, but once they're in, are we going to give them support? Are we going to help them? Are we going to give them a team? Are we going to make sure they're promoted for the good work they do? Are they going to get raises? And if the answer to all of those other questions is no, then I'm looking at them like, so why are you hiring me? That's not helpful to me at all. And so I think there's a conversation right at the beginning that needs to be had, and I think that's how we can spot that as employees coming in, is if someone's giving you this amazing, like, this is going to be great, and then you start asking the questions of, oh, am I going to get a team, or do I own this decision, or do I own this power? And if every answer after that is, no, not really, kinda, then the chances are it's like, okay, then you're putting me up here to be a face, and in which case I can go somewhere else where I can make actual impact. So I think that's probably a really good way to think about it from an employee perspective, and from a customer perspective, just making sure you have enough diverse perspectives in the room when you're making decisions.
Some really important questions for us to be thinking about in terms of identifying sincerity between tokenism. Deborah, do you know of an organization who has gone beyond blackwashing, who is actually, really authentic with embedding their racial justice and their racial equity? There must be one, right?
There are. There's definitely more than one. I'm a bit reluctant to like name names, but I can think of a particular brand that I'm quite closely involved with, who have quite an intentional approach to both internal and external representation, inclusion, and I think getting there with the equity side of things, right? Because for me, the E in DE&I is equity. Pay me what I'm worth, right? So, but they're definitely getting there because they are, and it's a shame I'm not comfortable naming names, but
Even if they're doing good
they're
stuff.
a very big FMCG brand.
Okay, it's
So-
Coca-Cola, right?
No. But they're doing good things. They're doing awesome things, and they have policies in place and they challenge their suppliers to also have those policies in place, and they challenge their media partners to also have those policies in place. Like, they're not playing about. And it's about representation and equal opportunities behind the camera, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, on the screen, in all their advertising. And that's not just black representation, that's LGBTQ, that's disabilities, that's 50 plus. They're looking at the whole spectrum and saying, from an underrepresented protected characteristics point of view, are we doing enough to make sure that our brands are actively supporting those audiences and those consumers? So one large FMCG brand, beginning with you, that I think we all know and love.
I would concur with that.
Yeah. So I think they're doing a lot. I think they're doing a lot. But I think there are quite a few brands that are waking up, and some of them are just being called on their BS. So they've had to like pull their socks up a little bit, because they've made some faux pas that were unforgivable, quite frankly, and had to backtrack and do things better.
I'm not implying that this was the organisation that you were talking about. However, there is an organisation called Unilever who have been working in this space for a number of years. And you can see in their output, they've been looking at representation since before it was a buzzword, and so it came across as authentic. And that's the really important part. But what I love about what you were talking about there is also the ecosystem approach. It's not just one thing. It's not just about recruitment. Bring me diverse folk. It's about, okay, now we want to listen to them and we want to make sure that they are progressing. And if they're not, that we understand why that might be. So we're looking at systemic approach as well as culture.
Oh, systemic. Oh, that word. Oh, but so important.
So
because
important.
if we don't change the system,
So important.
then we aren't going to make any changes at all, right? And that is, it's 200 years of reversing to do. So, long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to wrap up. Any other contributions? Any other thoughts from Zaimuna?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the only thing I'd say to that is, to the point about changing the system, we need to be in the system to be able to afford and exert the change. And, and to Fadzai's point, it's got to start with policy. We've got to think about that as the very sort of start. We then have to look at purchasing and that supply chain linked to that, and then finally it's actually about the people. And for me, ultimately, it's we need to be representative of the customers that we are working with and speak to. So if we can't be in and on the table to help with that change, then systematically we will never be able to make the change.
Ooh. I love that as a point to conclude on, although it looks like Deborah had something else. She felt inspired.
I was just going to say, sometimes when you can't get a seat at the table, you make your own table.
Plus one.
Black Tech Fest. I mean, we're sitting on our own table right now. So there's that. Tyler Perry does a good job of that. I mean, you may love him or hate him, but he got his own damn table.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. On that point, with these wonderful shares and your experiences and your suggestions, we're going to open it out to you, the audience. Does anyone have any thoughts, any ideas, any questions that you'd like to ask the panel? Do you feel kind of more that you would be able to recognize blackwashing if you came across it, that you feel like you have more an idea about what it is? Yeah? Excellent. And what about your organizations? Do they feel, has it given you a different perspective of your own organizations in some way? I'm getting some nods. I'm getting some, maybes. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all so much. Question. Can we have a mic for the question, please?
Actually, it's a question for Deborah, actually. I just wanted to understand a little bit better. You talked about kind of your particular focus with media and how you're making that more inclusive. I just wanted to understand more about all of that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So there's a number of things. So when we're talking to target audiences, I think it's fair to say that we've got a selection of syndicated tools that allow us to size our audience. So we can say, if we want to reach black women aged 18 to 35 to sell them hair care products, we can use a tool that will tell us the size of that audience in the UK, for example, and then it will list their kind of likes, the channels that they kind of go to, the magazines they read, their attitudinal life statements. Unfortunately, within some of those tools, the representation of black people is very low. So I have a live example of a piece of work that I did where we looked for audiences to target black women with hair care, and the sample size was 25 within this tool that surveys the whole of the UK. Like, we really
I could have found them more.
And I'm like, how is this possible? So we had to find other ways of finding those audiences. And that's number one for me. The representation with data is massive, because I'm not a figment of my own imagination. I'm pretty sure I exist. And if I exist, there must be more. And although we're not homogenous, there are archetypes. So we need to be able to have the data to be able to look at what the archetypes are of different types of audiences that are not our bog standard white audiences. Let me just say how it is, right? So within media, one of the key things is having the data, and there are a number of people that are doing some amazing work. There's a lady called Lydia Amoye who's written the Black Pound Report, and that data is invaluable because it helps us to understand lots of things about our audiences. And we also then think about, how do we sympathetically target those consumers? So are they represented in the advertising? Do we see ourselves in the ads? Is it done tastefully? Is it done really heavy-handedly? There are examples of some very heavy-handed ads. I'm sure you've all seen one or two where you've been like, what is this? There was a finance brand who had, 3 black people sitting on a sofa and in a darkened room, and it said, "Are you in the dark about your finances?" Not cool. They were trying to be representative, but that's not how you do it. So those are the sorts of things we look at. Is your media contextually relevant? Are you in the right places to reach the right people? And is it representative? So no matter where I am, if I'm reading the Financial Times or if I'm reading Black Hair and Beauty, am I seeing myself in those ads, in our consumers? Are our brands talking to me? So that's pretty much what we do. Yeah. No?
Amazing. Thank you so much for the question. Deborah, thank you for your response. Muna, Fatsai, just thank you. Thank you so much. Audience, thank you. Let's give our speakers a round of applause, please.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.